You guys are.
All right, we are here in Reno today on April 8th, and it's my pleasure to be interviewing United States District Court Judge for the District of Nevada, Robert Clive Jones, for whom I am his judicial clerk, and it is an honor because he is a friend, a mentor, and my boss. So, to start out, I'd like to ask a little bit about your childhood. When and where were you born?
I was born in Las Vegas, both my wife and I, and reared there. And other than school and military and a few other things, we lived there for the first 60 years of our life, after which we moved up here to Reno, Nevada.
Wow, that's great. From there, what influences would you say were the biggest in your life, from your family or friends or other mentors?
Well, I'd say my father and my grandparents. My father was an attorney and a district attorney down in Clark County, Nevada, so I always knew that I wanted to go into law. My grandfather was a self-made lawyer. He studied the law in various chambers and then passed the bar and became an attorney in Utah. So that was a very strong influence, especially my grandfather, who had a great love for the Constitution. Ran unsuccessfully one time for Congress, but he greatly influenced me.
So from an early age, you knew you wanted to be an attorney?
I did, yeah.
So you went into college. What was your major to prepare
Well,
for
I
law
finally
school?
ended up in accounting. My wife and I knew each other in high school and became very good friends. And her father was a very reputable, fine, certified public accountant there in Las Vegas for many years. And when we got a little closer, she and I decided that accounting would be a good route to the law. I'd always thought that I would go into philosophy, but with that adjustment, I decided on accounting. Yeah.
So you went to accounting and then you went to law school. What was your experience in law school like?
That's true. I took a hiatus out of undergraduate and went on a mission to Japan. I had gone on semester abroad to Australia, related to my school, and to Austria, and that was a great experience. But I was called to go on a mission to Japan, and I spent 2.5, 3 years there, learning the language and living with families, and that was a terrific experience. It has influenced my product, I think, in some of the law respects. After law school, after undergraduate school, I went into the military reserves. And so I went into basic training and came out in the Army National Guard and later transferred to the Air National Guard over in California. I had applied to various places, including back in Washington, D.C., which is a very strong normal course, or it had been a normal course for lawyers trying to get their legal education from Nevada. Georgetown and George Washington, as well as Washington State and other places. But just before I was to enter law school, we had our second child. And knowing that we needed to stay close to parents, we decided to stay in California. So I selected University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA, and decided to go there.
How was your experience in law school?
Oh, I loved it. It was very, very interesting. The first year, of course, you're trying to figure out what the professors want on the exams. But after I accomplished that, then I kind of knew which direction I wanted to go. I certainly loved constitutional law, but procedure and statutory law were areas that I was very interested in. I wrote my way on to the Law Review and had a published tax article, and was active in the moot court presentations, and we got to go to New York, for example. But all of that was very exciting and wonderful. My main exposure in law school, besides terrific law professors, was to some very close friends, including Andrew Guilford, who became a district court judge in Central District, and Alex Kozinski, who became a Ninth Circuit judge. And that was a great experience. Alex sat on the front row, of course, and raised his hand constantly, and Andy and I sat on the second or third row and would try to catch him and engage him in debate. I had some wonderful professors. I remember one of the professors that I worked for was in estate planning, and he wrote the book on trusts and estates. And that greatly influenced me as to the area of practice of law that I wanted to go into. But also some other great professors, including the tax professor and procedures professor. It was a great experience, and writing for the Law Review and for the moot court experience were great experiences.
So from there you went into tax law or estate planning?
Yes, estate planning. I clerked briefly for Judge Wallace down in San Diego, and then I was still working on my CPA certificate. I had taken the exam and passed it, but you still, in that day and age, you still had to get in 2 years of auditing practice. So I joined Haskins and Sells before law school, and through law school I had worked for Touche Ross, Laventhal and Kreckstein, which later filed a bankruptcy, for heaven's sakes. But Touche Ross was a fun experience through law school. It supported us and sustained us, and I worked there on international tax under an international tax manager, which was a great experience, and on savings and loans as well. And then that influenced me as to areas that I wanted to go into. So after acquiring my my CPA certificate with enough experience, I joined a law firm there in Las Vegas, Albright and McGimsey, and I worked with them for a year. Then following that, my father was still in practice but getting ready to retire. He had been a practitioner with my brother-in-law, George Holt, and I really wanted to spend a year or two with him before he retired fully. So I left Vern Albright, who was a terrific mentor and a wonderful teacher, and went with my father and George Holt. And I set up the tax side of the practice. George was criminal and divorce and general. He was a terrific litigator, I believe, and he was a prior district attorney prior to my joining him there in Clark County, Nevada.
From any of those experiences, do you have any one or two cases that you find to be very memorable? Or
well, yes, I don't want to mention names, but I had some wonderful estate planning clients and some great cases. What happened was Lloyd George, District Court, prior bankruptcy judge in Nevada, had also been a mentor and a strong friend. He was mentor to a great number of people in the law and out of the law. And I was one of those, and he encouraged me to sign up as trustee and then attorney for trustee in bankruptcies. That's what he had been handling as the bankruptcy judge for some time. And so when a vacancy came available here in Reno, Nevada, he encouraged me to apply. So I applied and ended up on a list of a few remaining candidates. In those days, it was a 6-year appointment for the bankruptcy court, and Judge Reed was interested in opening that bench up and having some great variety. So he was kind enough to interview several of us from Las Vegas, in addition to those from Reno, Nevada. And I was finally selected to be the bankruptcy judge, and I took that position. It was on a 6-year term. Halfway through that term, Congress passed the new statute governing bankruptcy, which provided for appointment by the circuit. And so I was naturally put on the list for the circuit appointment, which was a 14-year appointment.
And this would have been with the appeals court.
That's right. And so I was appointed for a 14-year term. I served that whole term, and then I applied for and was retained for a second term. But I served from February of 1983 to November of 2003, a little over 20 years. 13 of those years I spent on the bankruptcy appellate panel for the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit appoints, at that time it was 7 judges, to serve in panels of 3 for appeals arising now out of all the circuit. And so for those 13 years I did quite a bit of traveling to all of the places where we held court in panels of 3, and served on the bankruptcy appellate panel for those years. They were terrific years. During those years also, the circuit appointed me to serve on the Codes of Conduct Committee, which is a national committee under the Judicial Conference of the United States. And we were in charge of regulating, devising regulations under new ethics statutes, and primarily with jurisdiction over the codes of conduct for federal judges itself. And we would prepare opinions when we were asked in answer to questions from judges about ethical concerns or the application of the codes of conduct.
So you were handling the rules process, not necessarily the application of the rules to the judges?
No, it was the application. We would get questions from various judges. Can I do this? Can I not do that? Does this violate the codes of conduct? Those are very private correspondences, and we were authorized to give those responses and keep them confidential. In addition, however, we did publish a number of those opinions with consent so that they would be available to...
Any interesting cases you remember that are published?
No, I don't want to repeat those.
Yeah,
so
I
we did
understand.
have some interesting ones. But during the bankruptcy years, I had quite a few interesting cases.
Any of them you want to talk about briefly?
Just very briefly, I think during that 20 years, I probably handled Chapter 11s and bankruptcies for most of the resorts up and down the Strip in Las Vegas, Nevada. The Riviera, the Dunes Hotel, which later, I have a very interesting story on the Dunes. The Dunes we were putting up for auction. I think it had about $110 million worth of secured debt, but another $20–30 million worth of unsecured debt on top. And we were talking about it in the first meeting of creditors, and in walked Steve Wynn, who, as everybody knows, was a major developer of casinos. And he walked in and said, I have a cashier's check here for $110 million. But you have to either take it or leave it. And so I looked around the courtroom, and all the general unsecured creditors were kind of weeping because they would be cut out totally. And so we had to decline. We said, we're sorry. And he stormed out saying, you'll regret it. And later, of course, we sold that hotel to a Japanese gentleman who bid in, and I think he bought it for something in the range of $140 million, which made everybody very happy.
You guys didn't regret it.
Yeah. But a couple of years later, he filed bankruptcy. He just couldn't make a go of it. And it's my understanding that Steve Wynn came back in and purchased it for $110 million.
Oh, wow.
So, at any rate, turned out like Mr. Wynn predicted. Yeah.
So I think at this point we need to move on to
Okay.
your appointment to the district court. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that process?
A vacancy was coming available. I believe I replaced Judge Hagan, who was sitting up here. He had started in Las Vegas. Judge Hagan had served for 10 years, and he needed to take retirement. So he had decided to vacate, and that position became available. I was contacted by the White House in February of '03 and asked if I'd like to serve with two other members of a panel to come in and be interviewed by Justice and by the White House counsel. So I did. I agreed to do that, and I went in and was interviewed and then was selected for nomination.
Who contacted you from the White House?
It was Gonzalez's office, and he was White House counsel at the time to George W.H. Bush.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that interview like with Justice in the White House?
Oh, that was frightening, of course, but it was very interesting, and we had a good conversation. They asked me, I remember one of the most critical questions they asked me, apparently for them, was, of all of the justices, who do you admire the most? And I told them I admire Justice Scalia the most.
What was your basis for that?
Well, he has some very strong opinions and ideas about strict construction, certainly of statutes, but also of the Constitution. And I loved his doctrine, and I liked to read his opinions, and so I told them Justice Scalia. And that's probably, in my mind, one reason why they picked me. I don't know.
How many people did they interview? Do you know?
3 of us.
Okay.
The senators usually send panels of 3, and those 3 then are interviewed by the White House counsel's office.
And then you started out here in Reno in about 2003?
Right. I started, I was sworn in, let's say I was called in April of 2003, and then I was appointed after Senate confirmation hearings end of November, December 1st of 2003. So I've served since then. I served in Las Vegas until 2009. I was chief judge at the time, and Judge Sandoval needed to retire because he wanted to run for governor of the state of Nevada. And I had always been very interested in Reno. We lived originally in Reno in 1983 when I became a bankruptcy judge. We brought our family up here. They attended school up here for a couple of years. And then I had transferred back to Las Vegas, and so I was very interested in returning to Reno. And in 2009, as chief judge, I exercised the discretion to move up to Reno to fill that position, and we filled the position down south in Las Vegas.
What were the early days as a judge like? Any great judicial mentors?
Oh, well, for sure. Lloyd George. I had great admiration for Judge Reed, who was our chief judge at the time. Also for wonderful forerunner Judge Claiborne, who had to resign from the bench facing impeachment, but he was a mentor too. We loved to sit in the cafeteria, staff and others, and listen to Judge Claiborne. He was from Arkansas, and he could tell stories like were unbelievable. And so I loved to listen to his stories around the table. But he and Judge Reed and Judge George were terrific mentors during those early years.
And would you like to talk about maybe your most memorable 1 or 2 cases from being a
Well,
district court judge?
there have been many, many memorable ones, both criminal, you know, in some of the particular cases and particular areas, and civil. I'd say probably my greatest passion on the district court bench is constitutional law. Of course, criminal law is always very interesting, and that always involves substantial constitutional questions. But in civil areas, I have enjoyed very much environmental law, civil litigation and contract litigation, and also the constitutional questions that come up. That's kind of been a passion, something that I've tried to follow.
All right, so we only have a few minutes left, and the last question I need to ask is, as a senior status judge, why do you keep on going as a judge? Why don't you just hang up the robe?
Yeah.
What's your passion?
Well, my wife always encourages me to do so. I'm 75 this year. But I enjoy sitting on the bench. I especially enjoy listening to the stories in the cases. I enjoy patent law, as intricate as that can be from time to time, but especially the human stories that arise in the criminal law. I enjoy listening to those stories as they come across slowly in trials, and civil trials too. It's a great experience, and the interaction with the jury and awaiting jury verdicts is something that's always been very interesting to me. So that's probably, along with fulfilling our acknowledged duty of helping out our current active judges, it's still a passion for me, and I enjoy working in the District of Nevada. We've had several terrific chief judges since my time. Chief Judge Navarro, Gloria Navarro, has been a terrific chief judge. She was great. And now Judge Dew, who sits here in Reno along with me. They are very competent chief judges, and I've enjoyed working and continuing to work under them.
Do you have any statement to wrap it up? Anything I missed? Anything you wanted
no.
to say?
As you get towards the end of your life, you know, you look back at all of the dreams and goals you had set, and you realize that maybe half of those have been achieved. And you still have a bucket list of a lot of them left. But I've been very happy in serving in this position, and have enjoyed so much the association with the lawyers and the staff and the law clerks.
Thank you.
And especially those who served us in the court.
All right. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.